Okay, hi. Well, as promised, welcome to these GCSE Latin revision guides. The idea of these really is to go through the major grammatical and the major literary text points, which we've covered throughout the year and indeed last year, but just to reinforce those in a video-friendly format, which you can follow along and play and replay in order to refine your skills before your final exams. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to break down the components of that into individual videos. I'm not going to sit here and do just one video with everything because you'll see a skeleton by the end of it. It'll probably last for 5 days. So what we're going to do is just have an individual kind of subtopic within each one, and there'll be a series that you can then go over. The purposes of this first video, apart from to orient you into actually what's going to happen, it's more to kind of give the first kind of chunky piece of the course, which is the Regulus text. Okay, so this video, look at it as an introduction, but also the Regulus text. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the entire text. I'm going to have the translation on the screen, but I'm also going to have the Latin text and some questions on the screen as well. And the point of it is that basically as you go through, I'm going to be looking at every single word and how that translates on a very literal level. So, your printed translations, which you have, coupled with this video, which you're going to have as well, collectively should enable you to have a very, very good understanding of how the Latin works. We discussed how important that was before you broke up at Easter. Okay, so before we get started, for this Pliny video, you are going to need two things. You're going to need, and I'll put these on the screen as well, just so you can see, you're going to need your translation. Okay, so this is the Pliny translation. Again, it's on the text, which you have been given. You should have a copy of this in your files, but if not, feel free to email me. I'll email you another copy. It's not a problem, but just let me know. But here is the text. As you can see, a very short passage there. Okay. Second thing you're going to need is this. Now, this is a series of questions which I believe you have a copy of in your files. We went through some of this introductory question stuff when we first started looking at the text, and you may have some answers to these as well. The bit of this I'm going to be focusing on isn't the introductory questions. Okay, we're not going to be doing that. We are going to be looking at not even the 10-mark questions. It's these bits where the passage starts. So if you can get to them, I think it's on page 3 of the 4 pages. Okay, we're going to break down the text into passage 1, as you can see there, passage number 2, as you can see here, passage number 3, passage number 4, and then I believe there's only one other, passage number 5. Okay, and then we're at the end of the text. So we're going to just break it down into those sections. We're going to go through each one. I'm going to in turn translate. I'm going to translate the passage, as you can see here. This is the first passage here. I'm going to translate this on a very, very literal level. You should be able to tally that with your printed translations. And then what I'm going to do as well is just go through answers to these questions very quickly. These are going to be the comprehension questions, or variations on these, will be the comprehension questions you're asked in your exam. Okay, this covers everything off. So basically, if you know the answers to these questions, you're going to be fine in terms of those types of question. Okay, right. Without further ado then, let's get on to passage number 1. So Gaius Plinius Calvisio Suo Salvio. Okay, right. Before we get started, there is an important piece of information you need to know. You need to know who the author is, and you need to know that this is a letter. And because it's a letter, you need to know who it's addressed to. Okay, so the author is Pliny. Okay, for the purposes of your exams, you just need to know that, Pliny. Okay, if you want to learn the full Latin name Gaius Plinius, please do, by all means. But for the purposes of your exam, Pliny is good. It's very good. So that's the author. That's the guy who's written this letter. Okay, he's writing about Regulus. Notice he's not writing to Regulus. He's writing about Regulus. Okay. Now the point is, Regulus is going to be the guy that is the subject matter of this letter. So don't confuse the recipient with the subject matter. Okay. The subject matter is Regulus, but the recipient is someone else. It's this guy, Calvisius. Okay. Calvisius is one of Pliny's friends. Very, very simple. So, the author is Pliny, the subject matter is Regulus, and the recipient of this letter is Calvisius. Okay, right, with that in mind, let's go back to this first section then, and we have got a title here just basically saying that Pliny is writing to his friend Calvisius. That's all that means. So our text actually starts here at Assem para et accipe aureum fabulam. Okay, that's where our text starts. Now, the way this translates is, again, very introductory. It's written in the first person. These are Pliny's words. Okay, and what we've got is we've got a couple of, in fact, we've got two imperatives. So para, from paro parare, prepare, and accipe, receive. Okay, so the way this translates is prepare and as. Now an as, spelled ASS, is a tenth of a denarius. It's a very small unit of Roman currency. So your translation is saying penny. That's a good translation. If you want to translate it as an as, I think I said ASS a moment ago. Apologies. That's the animal. It's AS. Okay, don't get those confused. So AS is an as, a tenth of a denarius. Or if you want to, you can just put a penny. If I were you, I would put penny. I think that's fine. But AS is the technical unit. So prepare a penny. So produce a penny would be a good translation. And accipe, receive, an auream fabulam, a golden story. Golden in the sense of, it's brilliant. It's almost beyond belief. This guy Regulus is incredible. Okay. Fabulas imo. And then he says, what imo is doing here, it's being used adverbially to almost contradict what he's saying here. Notice how he says, accipe, receive a golden story. And then he goes ahead and says, actually, no, stories, plural. Okay, there are so many of these stories that Regulus has been doing that actually you can choose one from any number. Okay. He then goes on to say, nam me priorum nova admonuit, ne refert aqua incipiam. Okay, that's not too bad either. The main verb is here, admonuit. Notice how it's singular. Okay, and because it's singular, we're looking for a singular nominative in this case. That's what the translation skill should be telling us here. That nominative is here. Okay, nova. Novus means new. Okay, notice how it's feminine because it ends in a. It's feminine because it's linking back to these fabula. It is referring back to a story. So a nova is a new story. Okay, so once we know that nova means story, a new story, we can translate the rest pretty easily. So nam, for a new story, warned me, priorum, of the previous ones, of the older ones. Okay, priorum is masculine or neuter there, but I think it probably here means of previous times. It's this kind of linking back to previous ones. Okay, so a new one reminds me of the old. Ne refert qua incipiam. Okay, there's some grammar going on here which is above GCSE level, but in terms of what you need to know, that's an indirect. Yeah, it's kind of an indirect question. It may not be grammatically, but that's how we need to treat it. Notice how qua here comes from qui, quai, quod. And qua, R is ab, so by or from which is what that phrase is meaning. And then we're into a new clause with incipiam. So ne refert, again, this is above GCSE grammar, but all you need to know is, and it does not matter. And it does not matter. Qua incipiam, from which I begin. Okay, so let's put it all together. Pay a penny and receive a golden story, or even stories, for the new one reminded me of the previous ones, and it does not matter from which I begin. Okay, that is section 1 done. Let's go through these questions very, very quickly. Okay, assam para accipe, what practice is Pliny alluding to here? Okay, well, he is alluding to the practice of paying for storytelling. Okay, storytelling in the kind of mythical, magical sense. What the Romans did is in the fora and in and around Rome, they very often, paid pennies to kind of hear somebody tell them a story in public. as a form of entertainment. And the point of Pliny mentioning this is it is basically to show how unbelievable Regulus's real life actions were, almost to the point of being, beyond reality. So that's basically the answer to that. Okay, write down and translate the Latin word which shows that Pliny thinks his story is a good one. Well, it's auream, golden. Okay, golden, not in the sense of the actual metal, but in the sense of priceless in content. Okay. Ne refert aqua incipiam, so nor does it matter from which one I begin with. Okay, what does this phrase imply about the stories Pliny is going to tell? They're all brilliant. They're all aurea. Okay, very, very simple when you know what's going on. Okay, so that's section 1. Let's go on to passage number 2. This is one of the stories. Okay, and in our text there are 2. The one involving Blasus, which we'll come on to. The first one involving Verania. Okay. Okay, let's go through and translate it. So Verania, graviter iacebat, a straightforward nominative, adverb, and main verb. Okay, so Verania was lying, as in lying down in bed, graviter, seriously. What it means is Verania was bound in bed and she was mortally ill. Okay, so she was lying sick in bed. Ad hanc Regulus venit, again ad meaning to or towards. Hanc comes from hic haec hoc. Notice how hanc is feminine here because it is referring back to Verania. So we could translate this as this woman or her, both equally good. I don't mind which, and nor will an examiner, more importantly. Regulus is our nominative and venit is our main verb. So Regulus came to her. Regulus visited her. Okay, next bit. Primum imprudentiam hominis qui venerit ad aegram cuius marito inimiциssimus ipsi invisissimus fuerat. Okay, this is less obvious. This is actually quite hard to translate. What we've got here is we've got an adverbial use of primus, meaning first. So firstly, or first and foremost. Lots of people in class, and actually lots of people up and down the country, will mistakenly think primum and imprudentiam agree. They do not. They do not agree. So don't make that mistake. Primum is being used adverbially, and imprudentiam is an accusative. Okay. Hominis is a genitive of the man. We then have a qui clause. Okay. Qui starts a new clause, remember. So qui is referring back to hominis, the man who. This man is Regulus, that's who we're talking about. And then we've got the main verb in that clause, venerit, ad aegram. Again, this is a subjunctive form, but don't let that put you off. It's not a tense you're going to see this year. You're not going to see it in the language side of things. It's an AS level thing. Okay, it's actually more in between AS and A2 actually. So don't worry. You just need to know that's perfect tense. Okay, it's perfect tense, and we translate it as if it's normal. So imagine that says venit, venit, and that's absolutely fine here. Okay, so ad aegram. The aegram, aiger means somebody who's sick. So to the sick woman, notice how aegram is feminine. So again, that's all referring back to Verania. All of the adjectives here will either be referring to Regulus if they're masculine or Verania if they're feminine, because there are 2 kind of people in this story. Okay, that's all you need to know in terms of agreements and antecedents and things. Okay, cuius is genitive. Okay, that could be masculine or feminine. So what I'm going to tell you here is it's feminine because it's talking about Verania's husband. So just be aware of that. And that's the word for husband, marito. And then ipsi is the dative of ipse. So the dative singular of ipse. That is also feminine. It can be any gender grammatically, but here it's feminine because again it is referring to Verania. Okay. Right, let's go through it and translate it. Now we understand, roughly what's going on. And before we do, actually, let's just make a very quick comparison with your English translation. Okay, so notice how that's the primum in the text first. Again, it's being used adverbially, so it's not agreeing with impudentiam, the impudence, not at all. So your English is saying first, the impudence of the man who came to a sick lady to whose husband he had been a very great enemy, and to herself the most detested. Okay, well actually that's pretty literal. That's pretty literal. And if you can memorize that, that's great. But let's go through it. So first, the impudentiam, the impudence of the man. Qui, who. Venerit, came to the sick woman. Okay, and then we've got fuerat operating as the verb in both of the remaining clauses. In the ipsi invisissimus fuerat clause, yeah, that's where it physically is, but also in the cuius marito inimikissimus clause as well. So imagine there's fuerat at the end of that clause as well. Okay, that's important. Okay, so of whom or whose to the husband, literally. We're going to rearrange those words and we're going to say to whose husband. Okay, so let me go through that again. Of whom for the husband. Okay, so in other words, whose to the husband. Marito is dative. That doesn't sound right in English, not even in Yoda speak. Okay, in Star Wars terms, that still doesn't wash. So let's rearrange that and we will say to whose husband. Okay, that's the English translation. So to whose husband, fuerat, he had been most hostile. Okay, if you're inimicus, it means you're an enemy. So inimikissimus is the adjective from that, and it's superlative, issimus, so most hostile. And to her herself, he had been invisissimus, most, well, what's your English translation saying there? There's a number of different meanings there. Most detested, yeah, in video does mean to kind of look down upon, literally, but it can mean to kind of detest as well. So here, you know, detested is fine. So, and for her herself, he had been most detested. Okay, esto. Esto is the imperative of to be. Okay, it's the imperative from esse, so, and it's singular as well. So esto means let it be, literally. We'll come back with a better meaning in a moment. Si venit tantum. Si means if. Don't make the mistake of thinking you're doing French or thinking you're doing Spanish. You're not. Okay, it does mean if here, not yes. So don't do that. But if venit tantum. Tantum again is being used as a an adverbial phrase. It means only. Okay. So esto, granted. Si venit tantum, if he had only come. And actually venit is perfect tense there, so maybe came would be slightly better. So granted, if only he came to visit her. Okay, si venit tantum. At ille etiam proximus toros sedit. So at, but ille, he, again this is Regulus, etiam, even, sedit, sat, proximus, right next to her, toro, on the bed. Okay, it's this idea that he's invading her personal space, but he even sat right next to her on the bed. Okay, final bit of this section, quo die, qua ora, nata esset interrogavit. Okay, well you have seen this for GCSE. This is a grammatical feature you need to know. These are indirect questions. Okay, and we've got two of them. Just as we had to imagine fuerat was in both clauses, just up here, we have to imagine esset is in both clauses down here. So you should be in your brain thinking quo die esset, qua ora nata esset, interrogavit. So he, this is Regulus, he interrogavit, he interrogated her, he kept asking her. Quo die, on which day, nata esset, she had been born, qua ora, and in which hour, on which hour, nata esset, she had been born. Okay, right, really quick recap on section 2, just put it all together. Verania was lying grievously ill. Regulus came to visit her. Firstly, the impudence of the man who came to a sick woman for whose husband he had been most hostile, and to her herself he had been most hated. It would have been enough if he only visited, but he even sat right next to her on the bed. He asked on what day and on what hour she had been born. Okay, that is section 2. Hopefully that all makes sense. Again, get in touch if there's anything which does not. Okay, passage number 3. Ubi audivit, componit voltum, intendit oculos, movet labra, agitat digitos, computat. Okay, nihil. Right. What this is describing, this general passage, is it's describing Regulus's reaction and his trickery when he receives the information from Verania about the day on which she was born and the hour on which she was born. Okay, so just imagine that's just happened, and the introductory words here, ubi audivit, when he heard. So when Regulus had the answers to his questions, that's what it means. Okay, ubi audivit. What we've got here is we've then got a massive series of actions, this huge maelstrom of actions, and his eyes are moving, his face is moving, his lips are moving, his fingers are moving. Basically, he's jumping up and down like a jack in a box. And there are lots of rhetorical techniques as well, as your notes should cover off. Happy to go through that separately if not, but the purpose of these videos is really to give you the translation, so I'm going to focus on that. Okay, so we've got when he heard, componit voltum. So he puts together his face. Now he's not made of Lego, don't worry, his face isn't disintegrating, but it means he puts together a stern expression. It's a phrase which doesn't render in English precisely. Your translation is saying, let's have a look. He composes his expression. Okay, so notice how the Latin is componit. We can say composes. So he puts on a face. He puts on an expression. Okay, that's what that bit is meaning. So component voltum. He puts on an expression. He focuses his eyes. He moves his lips. He agitat digitos. So he fiddles his fingers. He wiggles his fingers around. Okay, as if he's trying to kind of. I don't know if you can see this on the video, but when people add, they go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what it means. He agitat digitos. So he does that with his fingers, and he computat. He does mathematical sums. He computes. Okay. Nihil, nothing. Ubi diu miseram expectationis suspendit. Okay. Again, this is another main clause, so we can just do it as we see it. So ubi, when suspended, when he kept in suspense, when he kind of kept waiting, is what it means. And we're looking for an accusative. It's a transitive verb, so it has objects, and our object is here, miseram. Okay. Again, notice the feminine ending. It's referring back to Verania. So when he kept miserable Verania waiting, diu, for a long time, in expectation. So when he'd done that, inquit, he said, habes climactericum tempus sed evades. Okay, the only tricky thing about this, apart from the vocab, which I'll give you, is the tenses of these verbs. It's really important from a language perspective, you understand the difference. Okay, habes and evades, they both look as though they've got the same ending, es, and visually they do. They both end in es, but there is a major difference, and it comes down to the group, the conjugation, which I don't like jargon, so verb groups. Just keep it simple. Which verb group they're in? Habeo is in group 2. It's in conjugation verb group 2. We can tell because the present tense has habeo. There's an e there, and the infinitive also has an e, habere. That tells us it's group 2. In contrast, evado, evadere. I know this word isn't on your GCSE vocab list, but it does have ere in the infinitive, evadere, but it does not have an E in the present tense. It goes evado, no E. Okay, critical. What that's telling us is this ES ending is actually future tense, evades, whereas this ES ending is present tense. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, again, if this doesn't resonate, I'll be surprised because I've mentioned it 4,000 times this year, but get in touch and we'll go through it. Habes is present tense because it's conjugation verb group 2. Evades is future tense because it is conjugation verb group 3. Okay, once we know that, we can translate it. So he said, present tense, you have a climactericum tempus, a very life-threatening time ahead of you. Okay, we'll go back to your corresponding English in a moment. But climactericum, very kind of a medical word, a potential brush with death coming. Okay, said evades, but future tense, you will evade it, you will get over it. Okay, now let's just contrast that to your translation. Make sure you're happy with how it works. Okay, you have a critical time. That's the climactericum tempus. Okay, you will survive. That is evades. Okay, right, that gets us down to here. Quod ut tibi magis liqueat haruspicem consulam, quem frequenter expertus sum. Okay, again, we need to explain this quod. Okay, that's the main thing. It could mean because, or it could be the neuter of qui. Always have to bear that in mind. Okay, we'll go into how we can tell in a moment. Again, from a language point of view, you must be able and confident to differentiate between the two. So we'll go on to some ideas in a moment. But to make it more clear to you, okay, but to make it more clear to you is what the English is saying. Yeah, okay. And then we've got quod tibi. Okay, well, I think quad could mean because, but it's introducing a new clause. Notice this ut clause, which is coming up. So what we've got here is it's the neuter of qui, a thing which, something that, something which is how we're going to translate that. Okay, so something which, that's quite hard, but that's what it means. So something that liqueat magis tibi. Magis means more, tibi means for you, and liqueo is very, very similar to reliqueo, to leave behind. So something which will leave behind more for you, something which will open things up for you more, something which will make things easier for you. Okay, that's the meaning of this phrase here. Consulam, again, some people think these agree, that they don't. Don't make the mistake of thinking there's a grammatical noun-adjective connection here. There really isn't. Consulam isn't even a noun or an adjective, it's the verb. Consulo is to consult. Because consulo, consulere with an E, is in conjugation or verb group 3, am is the future tense. It's the first person singular future tense. So I will consult. There's your verb right there. Okay, so something which will make things more clear for you. I will consult a soothsayer. Quem's linking back to the soothsayer. So a soothsayer whom expertus sum frequenter. Okay, frequenter is an adverb, so frequently. Expertus means to have experience in, and then sum means, well, it's the present tense of SA to be. So whom I am frequently experiencing, whom I use a lot would be a good translation. But let's just do it literally. Whom frequently sum I am expertus, experiencing, whom I use a lot. Okay, sine mora sacrificium facit ad firma exter considerum significatione congruere. Okay, again, yeah, okay. So this bit, whom I use a lot, is the end of Regulus' speech. Okay, what happens then is there's a line describing what he does after he has finished talking. So sine mora, without delay, sacrificium facit. He makes, notice the present tense, a sacrificium, a sacrifice. He affirmat, the exter. Okay, he confirms, and this is quite gross. What we've got is, we've got, well, grammatically, we've got an indirect statement. So he confirms, affirmat, that. And exter is our accusative, congruere is our infinitive. Okay, and this other stuff we do last. So really quick bit of revision on how we do these. We do the introducing verb first, affirmat. We then put a that in second. Okay, there's no word for that in the text. We've got to put it in. So we put that in. We then do the accusative third. We then do congruere fourth, the infinitive here. And then anything in between the accusative and the infinitive, we do last. Okay. Okay. So affirmat, he confirms that the exter, the entrails, the innards of the animals being sacrificed. Okay. So he confirms that the entrails congruere, are congruent or are consistent. You know, they match up. Cum, with the significatione, with the meaning, the interpretation, siderum, that's a genitive plural, of the stars. Okay, that's the hardest passage by far. Let's go through it one more time before we go on to passage 4 and passage 5, and then we'll be done on this video. So passage number 3, when he heard, and you could even put Regulus in if you wanted. I'm going to do that, so I'll start again. Ubi audivit. So when he heard, he composes an expression, he fixes his eyes, he moves his lips, he fiddles with his fingers, or he moves his fingers around, and computat, he makes calculations. Nothing. When he kept miserable Verania waiting for a long time in expectation. He said, you have a serious time, but you will get over it. Something that will make things more clear for you. I will consult a soothsayer whom frequently I make use of. Without delay, he makes a sacrifice. He confirms that the entrails are consistent with the interpretation of the stars. Okay, right. These questions again, usually they're dead easy when you know the text, and you should be finding that. Ubi audivit. So what does this refer to? Well, it refers to Regulus hearing on what day and on what hour Verania has been born. Remember, he was asking her for that information at the end of the previous passage. So that's what that's doing. Okay, componit voltum, intenit oculos, movit labra, accitat digitos computat. Okay, what exactly is Regulus doing here? Well, we don't need to repeat, monkey fashion, everything he does. It's enough here to say he is pretending to make highly complex astronomical calculations. Okay, that's what he's pretending to do. Of course, he can't do that, but he's pretending to. Okay, how does Pliny's choice and arrangement of words give the impression that Regulus is thinking fast and concentrating fast? Make 3 points referring closely to the Latin. Okay, you could talk about this all day and all night if you wanted to. There are rhetorical techniques everywhere you look. But let's just look at some high-level features. You've got hyperbaton. The verbs are coming first, showing how his actions are taking predominant stage here. Okay, you could talk about the variation and the extent of the parts of his body which are involved in the making of these calculations. His face is involved, his eyes are involved, his mouth is involved, his fingers are involved, there's all kinds of magical kind of what's the word, histrionics or acting going on here. Okay, 3 points. Let's come up with another one. Asyndeton. None of these clauses are separated by a conjunction, typically and. So it just shows how quickly and how kind of machine-like his behaviour is as he does these kind of weird and wonderful calculations. If we were looking just before when he says climactericum tempus, don't forget he's using foreign language. Climactericum is not a Latin word. It is a Greek word that he is using to try and confuse Verania with jargon. Okay, so 3 points there, referring to the Latin, done. Okay, habes climactericum tempus. Okay, literally you have a serious time. In better English, in more natural English, you have a grave time ahead of you. You are going to have a life-threatening situation, maybe, or a period of time where your life is in doubt. Anything along those sensible lines would be good for that. Okay. Question number 8. I will consult a soothsayer whom I frequently use. Okay. Explain the very Roman practices referred to here. Okay. You're not going to have this in your exam, but it's useful for you in terms of background. A haruspex, here we've got the accusative, but a haruspex was a very, very seriously regarded Roman religious person. And what they did was the Romans thought they had some kind of connection and ability to interpret what the gods were giving in terms of information, okay, about their wishes and what they wanted. So what someone would do is they would typically consult a haruspex when they want divine guidance on whether a proposed course of action would be a good thing to do or a bad thing to do. A kind of way of predicting the future, if you like. Key examples are Roman generals, the likes of Julius Caesar, would go to a haruspex before he wanted to attack someone. And what he would do is he would say, look, I'm interested in trying to invade Britain, for example. Is it a good time and is it a good plan? Are the gods willing for Britain to be invaded? And, the haruspex would then make a sacrifice, which we'll come on to in a second, and he would give his feedback. We might think it's a bit silly or certainly a bit maybe weird from our belief systems, and that's up to you. Maybe not giving any rights or wrongs here, but it's important the Romans took this ultra seriously. Very, very likely they would go by the will of the gods. And if some haruspex said, look, Julius Caesar, the gods don't think it's a good time to go to Britain at the moment because these signs from this sacrifice are not favourable, very, very likely that Julius Caesar would take that advice on board. Okay, so really serious religious stuff. Sacrificium fecit, that's an actual sacrifice, so he makes a sacrifice. Typically we're talking about animals, so lamb, various types of animals were sacrificed, and the way of doing it was there are different ways of doing it, but basically the animal would be killed and the entrails, the exter, so the vital organs, would be examined. Typically the liver, typically the kidney. I believe some other parts were examined as well, but the liver would be kind of looked at in terms of its colour, in terms of whether there are any spots on it, the size. All these different metrics came into play, but they would give messages, and the haruspex would be skilled in interpreting what those colours and spots, etc., meant in terms of a particular question. Okay. Finally, the signification, the interpretation of the stars. Very often the Romans, again, probably a thought system or a belief system they inherited, probably not something they invented themselves, but that whole period of history is quite hazy. But basically they looked at astronomical data as well, and when the stars were in a certain position and sacrifices all aligned, typically that was a very superstitious way of them gaining confidence for their actions. So we're looking at astronomical data here, and we're looking at sacrifices as well. Okay, right. Let's move on to passage number 4. There's only 2 more, you'll be pleased to know. So illa ut impericulo credula poscit testamentum. Okay, well, of course, what's the background before we dive into this? The background to this is that Regulus is going to tell her that, you know, she needs to do certain things. I think the key thing to remember is Verania is mortally ill. Okay, she's going to die. She's definitely going to die. But Regulus gives her belief that she might be able to live if she buys into using him and his haruspex, his soothsayer, to give her a favourable, godly favourable an opinion. Okay, and she's willing to pay for that. So that's the way Regulus tricks her into signing over her wealth to him, is so he can pay this haruspex and other doubtless significant expenses. Okay, so this next section is describing that. So let's just dive into it. Illa. You might get a question, who is Illa referring to? Well, of course, it's feminine. It's referring to Verania. So you can translate that as she or Verania. Both are fine. I'm going to say Verania. So Verania, ut in periculo credula. Again, that there isn't a kind of a subjunctive following this ut. That the clause is ut in periculo credula legatum regulo scribit. Okay, that's the main clause. Because scribit is not subjunctive, we're not into any purpose clauses or indirect commands or result clauses, any of those kind of things. We literally just translate this as or when. Okay, as or when. Here we're probably going to go for when. Okay, so ut in periculo credula, that's the clause we need to concern ourselves with first. Notice how we've got a clause here and we've got a clause here. So we do not have a verb in this clause here, and we need to supply one. Okay, SA would be sensible. So believing credula. So when credula est, she is believing in periculo, that she is in danger. So she, when believing she was in danger, she poscit testamentum, she demands her will, and she scribit, she writes a legacy for Regulus. She writes an amount of money into her will for Regulus. That's what it means. Okay. Mox, soon in gravescit, she deteriorates, she becomes worse. Clamat, she shouts. Dying. And then this next bit is reasonably tricky because it's a rather long indirect statement. So she shouts, dying, that hominem scelestum perfidumque esse. So that esse, he is a man wicked and treacherous. Again, we're not Yoda, we're not starring in Return of the Jedi. We're going to arrange those words to make them sensible English. So she shouts, dying, that he is a wicked and treacherous man, would be a good translation. Ac, and remember, we're still in the indirect statement, so we still need to consider how we keep the same grammar. We probably need another that in English to make this make sense. So, and that more even than perjurous. So that he is more even than perjurous. Okay, so he is more wicked and treacherous even than the crime of perjurum, of perjury. So she's saying he's the most evil kind of guy possible. Okay, again, if we go back to your English, I think there is an instructive point here. Even more than perjured. Yeah, okay. So perjurum is an adjective as well. Okay. So if we go back, these are all adjectives describing Regulus. Okay, there are 3 of them. Okay. So she's shouting even, wish I could pronounce my words today, sorry. So shouting, she shouts, dying, that he is esse, a man, wicked and perfidum and treacherous, ac plus etiam, even more quam than he is perjurous. So she's kind of, oh dear, I didn't want to do that, sorry. She's accusing him of three things here: being wicked, of being treacherous, and being wicked and treacherous in a degree or in a level even more than he is perjurous. Remember, he swore on various things, his life, etc., that he was telling the truth, and of course he's not. He's just trying to steal her money. So that's the thinking behind that. Qui, notice how that's masculine, so that is going to be referring to Regulus. So qui sibi per salutem filii per peieravisset, very rare, a rare type of verb. Notice how it's ISSE plus an ending. It's a pluperfect subjunctive. So we need to get a had in our English here. So who had peieravisset, who had perjured himself through the safety of his son. Again, if we go back to the English, just help you understand what's going on here. He who had sworn a false oath. Well, perjury is when you swear a false oath, so that's kind of the same thing. Who had sworn a false oath through the safety of his son. Okay, go back to the Latin. Qui, he who had sworn for himself a false oath, that's the meaning of the verb, through the safety of his son. Literally on his son's life. That's what it means in English. Okay, facit hoc Regulus non minus scelerate quam frequenter quod eram deorum quos ipse quotidie fallit in caput felicis pueri detestator. Okay, again, this is reasonably hard, so let's go back to the English first of all and just make sure you understand the connections here. So Regulus does this no less wickedly than frequently, because he calls down onto the head of that unfortunate boy the anger of the gods whom he deceives daily or every day. Okay, so we've got some slightly mixed up word order here. So Regulus does this not less through crime or wickedness than frequently, because he brings down the anger of the gods onto the head of his poor boy. And then we've got this quos phrase, which is linking back. Notice how quos is plural, so it's linking back to deorum, the gods. Okay, so whom he himself cheats daily. So whom he himself fallit cheats quotidie daily. Okay. One last go through from start to finish on section 4, and then we'll look at these questions very, very quickly. Okay, so Illa, Verania, when she believes she's in danger, Posket demands the will. She writes an amount of money for Regulus. Soon she grows worse. She shouts, dying, that the man is wicked and treacherous even more than he is perjurous. He who had sworn a false oath through the safety of the son to him, so of his son. Regulus does this not less through crime or wickedness than frequently, because he brings down the anger of gods whom he himself tricks every day onto the head of his poor boy. Section 4 done. Let's look at these questions very, very quickly. I'm not going to spend too much time on these. So why did Verania ask for a will? Well, of course, she wants to write. She wants to change her will. and she wants to include Regulus in her will, assigning a large amount of money, a legatum, over to him. Okay, so that's why. Right, clamat moriens hominem, scelestum perfidumque, ac plus etiam quam peiurum esse. Okay, how do these words reveal the strength of the dying woman's feelings about Regulus? Well, there's many things you could mention here. Clamat, she's not just talking, she's shouting them out, so highly emotional. She doesn't bring herself to mention his name. She's calling him hominem, so she's so angry she can't bring herself to even mention his name. This is a very vivid piece of vocabulary. Scelestum, wicked. Perfidum, again, is very vivid, treacherous. Peiurum, perjurous, somebody who swears false oaths. The fact that this is a kind of tricolon. It's not a technical tricolon in grammatical terms, but there are three very strong adjectives being used. You could mention that's relevant. The fact that he's willing to go to any lengths, he's willing to kind of swear a false oath on his son's life, is something that she obviously disapproves of. So lots of things you could mention there. Okay, and then question 11. Okay, explain what Pliny means by these words. In your answer, okay, well, what does he mean by these words? Apart from the literal translation, what Pliny is basically saying is, who'd want to be Regulus's poor son? Basically, he doesn't just make a false vow once, he does it every single day. And because he does it every single day, his poor son is doomed to some miserable future. Maybe his son's sons, maybe his whole family. The gods tend to look down very dimly on this. So that's basically what he means by these words. Regulus is doing the most unholy, evil thing you can possibly imagine. And that's the effect of Pliny's words. Okay, right. Passage number 5. Okay, the last passage in this text. This is now a completely different story. So chapter 1 was Verania. You can imagine we've just done that. Okay, this is a kind of a different victim, if you like. Velleius Blaisus. Okay, so illa divis consularis. So he who was rich to a sort of consular level. If we read through the English again, just so you're happy with where this connects. Okay, it's just this last little amount here. So Velleius Blaisus, that wealthy ex-consul, was afflicted with a terminal illness. He was wanting to change his will. Okay, Regulus was hoping for something from his new will because recently he had begun to win his favour. And he was encouraging and asking the doctors in what way they could prolong the life of the man. So in other words, the life of Velleius Blaisus. After the will was signed, this is Regulus, he changes his tune. He alters his tone. And to the same doctors, he says, "How long are you torturing the poor man? Why do you begrudge him a good death to whom you cannot give life?" Blaisus dies and, as if he had heard everything, did not even leave him, so again Regulus, the least amount. Okay, so this is an unsuccessful attempt by Regulus to con somebody else. And there's a kind of a small punchline at the end there. Okay, let's look at how it works. So Velleius Blaisus, that's our nominative. Ille, so that. Rich, consular one. So this is someone who's not actually a consul, but they used to be. You could only, under Roman law, you could only be a consul technically once and for 1 year, although people did break that law. In particular, Julius Caesar, and I think, well, definitely the first emperor, Augustus. I'm sure other people did as well. But Velleius Blaisus, that wealthy former consul, that's what that word means. Okay, was being afflicted, novissima ablative valetudine, with a very recent sickness. Cupiebat mutare testamentum. He was desiring to change testamentum, his will. Regulus, who was hoping for, now again, when you see spero, you'd normally expect to see an indirect statement, but you can just hope for something, a normal accusative. You can hope for life, you can hope for death. Probably wouldn't do that. You know, you can hope for lots of money. And here, aliquid is simply an accusative. So there's no indirect statement here. So who, qui, sperabat, was hoping for aliquid, something. Ex novo testamento, from the new will. Since recently, coiperat, he had begun, pluperfect tense, he had begun captare eum, literally to influence him, to get close to him. Okay, we've then got, and this is really quite tricky, we've then got medicos hortari et rogare, ut quoquo modo, vitam hominis pro rogarent. Okay, right, key factors. Yeah, okay. So we've got an indirect question. Also got an ut. Notice how we don't have any main verbs here. These are infinitives. So what we've got is we've got historic infinitives. We have to pretend hortari and rogare read hortar bartor and rogarbat. Okay, we have to pretend they're the main verb. So he kept encouraging the doctors, medicos, and he kept asking doctors ut prorogarent. So ut quoquo, how, the way to translate this is how they could prorogarent, prolong the vitam, the life of the man. Okay, again, if we just very quickly go back to the English, in what way is what your translation is saying. Okay, I'm saying how, because in what way and how, they're synonyms. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, postquam, signatum est testamentum. Right, so after postquam, testamentum, the will, that's the nominative here. So after the will, signatum est, was signed. Mutat personam. Regulus changes his personam, changes his persona. He changes his attitude. Okay, vertit ad locutionem eistemque medicis. So vertit ad locutionem. So he changes his ad locutio, his way of speaking. He changes his speech. Medicis eistemque, to the same doctors. Inquit, he says, quousque miserum cruciatis. Why? Again, this is an old-fashioned word. You're not going to see it very often, so don't panic about it. Just remember it means why. Cruciatis, are you torturing the wretched man? He's just been trying to persuade them to prolong his life. Now he's saying, I've got some money here, you can kill him. Okay, so why are you torturing the wretched man? Cur invidatis bona morte. So why, invidatis, are you begrudging him? Why are you preventing him from having a bona morte, a good death? To whom, that's the dative of qui, to whom non potestis, you are unable, dare, to give, vitam, life. Okay, so why are you begrudging a good death to a man whom you're not able to keep alive? Okay, moritur Blisus, Blisus dies, et, and, tamquam, as if, audiu viset, he had heard, omnia, everything, ne tantulum quidem, not the smallest little thing. There's no verb, so we have to put one in. Was left. Makes sense. Regulus to Regulus. So Regulus was not left a penny. Okay, let's go through that section one more time, just from start to finish. So Velleius Blasius, that wealthy ex-consul, was being afflicted by a most recent sickness. He was wanting to change his will. Regulus, who was hoping for something from the new will, since recently he had begun to get close to him, was encouraging and was asking the doctors how they might prolong the life of the man. Postquam, so after testamentum, the will, signatum est, was signed, so in other words changed, the new will, mutat, Regulus changes his persona. He changes the way he speaks, his manner of speaking, it's a noun, but his manner of speaking to the same doctors. He says, why are you crucifying, literally, so why are you torturing the wretched man? Why are you begrudging a good death to whom non possestis, you are not able to give vitam, life? Blisus dies, et, and, tamquam, as if audivisset, he had heard, omnia, everything, ne tantulum quidem, not the smallest penny, not a penny. We put in a verb because there isn't one, was left, regulo to regulus. Okay, last couple of questions. Valles Blisus, okay. Write down and translate the Latin word which explains why Regulus began. Okay, why would Regulus be in touch with Blisus? Well, it's because he's dives, he's rich. Okay, there's money in it for him if he can get him to change his will. Okay, what did Blisus want to do? He wanted to mutare testamentum, to change his will. Medicos voltaret rogare. Okay, give in English what Regulus would have said to the doctors. How can you prolong the life of this man? Question 15. When did Regulus' attitude towards the doctors change? Well, of course, after the will had been signed. Okay, the new will. Number 16. What do Regulus's two questions suggest he thinks the doctors should be doing? Okay, well, hopefully it doesn't take a genius to work out. He thinks they should stop offering any care which has the effect of prolonging Blisus's life any longer. Regulus wants Blisus to die as soon as possible because once he's dead, Regulus can cash in on his will. Okay, he can't benefit from this money or what he thinks will be his money all the time Blisus stumbles on and survives. So pretty gruesome, but that's number 16. And then number 17, why do you think Pliny wrote this instead of simply saying nihil? Oh, okay. So not a, okay. So it's for emphasis. Tantulum is a diminutive form of tantum. So tantulum, a little, not so great as a little thing. So nothing at all. It's emphasizing how Regulus was not left with a penny. So it's for emphasis. Okay, right. That brings to a conclusion the first video we've made. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this tonight. As you can see, as I hope you can see. No, you're not going to be able to see that. Thought that would have worked. Never mind. But look, the time is just before 8 o'clock on the 7th of April. So it's on Monday. Okay, that's real time. I'm going to upload this video tonight. Okay. When I've done that, I'm going to email you and let you know it's up there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to come back to me and say, you know, is this useful? Is it a waste of time? Is there anything different you want done? Is there anything, how could it be done better? And then once we've kind of got some feedback on this, I'm then going to pile through and do the Aeneid next. Okay, obviously longer, a little bit more complex, but it's okay. We'll get through it in the same time. I'll probably do several videos on that and break it down a little bit more. But we'll do the Aeneid next, and then we'll do the Thessalian, which is third, and then all of the subjunctive grammar after that. Okay, so I will give you 24 hours after I've emailed you tonight. I hope this is useful. Any questions, let me know. Okay, thanks.